Okay, so I want to talk about the green utopia that we are sold in mainstream media and advocate narratives. So when we talk about the future of energy, we often hear, words like clean energy, sustainability, renewables, and so on. And this language is actually carefully designed to imply that it will be a smooth ride, switching from, the dirty fossil fuels and nuclear, the conventional energy systems to, these allegedly superior renewables, which is mostly solar and wind, of course. And if this sounds too good to be true, it actually is. This is selling us a utopia instead of giving us a grasp of what this process would actually mean and, what kind of human suffering we need to endure to actually accomplish that. So it's, presented as a superior alternative that has no real cost. We're just switching from a inferior to a superior technology, and we are better off actually. And the case in point I just came across today, which is meteorologist and climate alarmist Eric Holthaus, who is also a frequent contributor to GRISP, which is a publication that deals in these alarmist climate narratives. And he, on Twitter, he said the following. He was actually reacting to signs of a slowing economy. So he said, friendly reminder that comprehensive climate legislation, a radical restructuring of society in order to save our planet's habitability, is the best economic stimulus package we could ever hope for. So, okay, we'll just invest in green technology, of course, and then we will be actually better off. And we see this a lot in proposals like the Green New Deal and other narratives. And for those who don't find the historical evidence sufficient since at least the mid-19th century, thanks to the French economist Frédéric Bastiat, we know that smashing your working capital doesn't actually make you richer. But to drive home this point, I want to point everyone to the work of Mark Mills, who was a former Power Hour guest and is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And here's an article in the Wall Street Journal that's called "If You Want Renewable Energy, Get Ready to Dig." And so this is meant to emphasize that all of these new technologies like solar and wind and battery technology and so on, they require some real work and they have their own downsides. And, so I just want to read a couple of quotes from this article to emphasize this. And I want everyone to keep in mind one of my favorite themes when we talk about these energy transitions to new energy technologies. And this is the magnitude of the problem. That's a very important point here. So the first quote is from Mark Mills is, the International Renewable Energy Agency calculates that solar goals for 2050, consistent with the Paris Accords, will result in old panel disposal constituting more than double the tonnage of all today's global plastic waste. So this is a lot of material, of course, that needs to be dealt with. The second quote is, a single electric car battery weighs about 1,000 pounds. Fabricating one requires digging up, moving, and processing more than 500,000 pounds of raw materials somewhere on the planet. So again, the magnitude of the problem. This is a lot of material that has to be digged out of the ground. The next quote is, world demand for rare earth elements, which aren't rare but are rarely mined in America, will rise 300 to 1,000% by 2050 to meet the Paris Green goals. If electric vehicles replace conventional cars, demand for cobalt and lithium will rise more than 20-fold. That doesn't count batteries to back up wind and solar grids. So battery electric cars will again require a lot of digging, and a lot of material needs to be moved and processed. This is why battery electric cars actually have a significant CO2 footprint, because the manufacturing is so demanding in resources. And the final quote from the article, Building enough wind turbines to supply half the world's electricity would require nearly 2 billion tons of coal to produce the concrete and steel, along with 2 billion barrels of oil to make the composite blades. More than 90% of the world's solar panels are built in Asia on coal-heavy electric grids. So this shows in very physical terms what these renewables and the clean technology and so on actually requires. Just like fossil fuels and nuclear power and so on, everything requires a lot of human industry and processes that have some kind of footprint. And actually, all of these technologies, from solar panels to wind turbines to batteries, they require fossil fuels to be as quote-unquote affordable as they are right now. So if you would take this away and would force everyone to build a wind turbine with a wind turbine and a battery with a wind turbine, that would actually escalate the cost. And so this would necessarily impoverish hundreds of millions and keep billions of humans in their current state of poverty or worse. So instead of this boon and stimulus to the economy, this is just a friendly reminder that you cannot have a free lunch. It's going to be painful if we are destroying our working capital as is and replace it with an inferior, quote-unquote, alternative. This will be very problematic. And just like the Soviet utopia that promised a free and prosperous society miserably failed, this is also the future of this green utopia that we're talking. And it's actually very disingenuous, to say the least, to promote this as some kind of better deal. It's just, markets fail and don't find the best solution, and fossil fuels are chosen for some arbitrary reason, and we would actually be better off just switching to solar. And, this is a narrative that prevails, but it's actually false and very dangerous to the future of humans.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to take really seriously this idea that they're utopian and get at what exactly that means. So one of the things that is true virtually across the board of utopian thinkers is that they never spend that much time explaining exactly how their utopia is going to work. So if you take the communists, they wrote volume after volume, but it was almost all about what was wrong and evil about capitalism. It was not about how communism is going to work. Like, how are we going to decide what to produce and in what quantities, and what reason do we have to think that there's going to be innovation, and what kind of incentives are we creating, and what historical evidence do we have that this has ever worked? And, it's basically just capitalism is bad, get rid of capitalism, and then we'll worry about how our system is going to work later. And then it does get put into practice, and later comes, and they look around and you get nothing like what they promised. So it's this green utopia, but the green utopia is a bunch of mining and a bunch of blackouts. It is the complete opposite of this kind of fantasy they created. But they actually, in fact, got what they were really after, because what they're really after is not this utopia of communism or this green utopia, but to smash capitalism and to smash industrialization. And so what you're seeing here is the fact that utopias are actually rationalizations for destruction, whether it's capitalism or fossil fuels. It's, this is bad compared to my fantasy, but you're not really after a fantasy. It's you're tearing down something good and something real, but you want to be able to position yourself to others and think of yourself as an idealist. And you can contrast that with people who you might mistake for utopians, but genuine idealists. And that's, the founding fathers of this country, where they were profoundly concerned with what positively are we creating? How will it work? What is the evidence of history it's going to work? What are all the ways it could go wrong? And, what is the best possible system that is actually achievable? And the green movement is not at all idealistic in that sense. It's utopian in the sense that the communists were utopian, which is just a different way of saying that it's actually nihilistic.